Donald Trump, on the verge of assuming the presidency of the United States again, has clear plans to resume his policy of maximum pressure on Iran. This approach is not new for Trump, as during his first term, he implemented a series of aggressive measures that redefined the relationship between the two countries. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran, a decision that marked the beginning of a rigorous campaign of economic sanctions aimed at the regime's main sources of revenue, such as oil exports. Iranian exports, which once reached about 2.5 million barrels per day, drastically fell to less than 500,000 barrels daily. In addition to economic sanctions, the Trump administration also designated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, the first time the United States had classified an official entity of a sovereign state in this manner, expanding barriers for the regime in financial transactions and international partnerships. Moreover, in 2020, Trump ordered an attack that resulted in the elimination of General Qasem Soleimani, head of the Quds Force, one of the most prominent figures in all of Iran, an action that, as you can well imagine, escalated tensions to alarming levels with threats of direct retaliation from Tehran. However, it also served as a harsh blow to Iran's military influence axis in the region. Now, with his return, Trump plans to intensify all these measures even further, with sanctions promising to be expanded to target even more sectors of the Iranian economy, while military measures, including strikes against nuclear facilities, are being discussed as part of a strategy to contain the Iranian regime. On the other hand, Tehran still represents a threat to U.S. allies in the region, especially Israel, despite the significant weakening of Iranian proxy groups. Iran's influence remains palpable. The question that remains is how far Trump is willing to go to ensure Iran is neutralized as a strategic threat. Internally, Iran faces a severe storm, starting with its economy in shambles. In 2024, the Iranian currency devalued by 40% against the dollar, while per capita GDP plummeted 45% since 2012, plunging much of the Iranian population into extreme poverty. The protests are a clear reflection of this collapse, with merchants from Tehran's Grand Bazaar historically playing an important role in moments of social discontent, closing their shops in a rare strike against galloping inflation, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Workers in the oil sector, one of the country's most strategic, are also protesting for wage delays. The strikes are accompanied by powerful messages like posters carried by retirees in the city of Awaz, asking for an end to militarism, war funding, extremist groups, and the persecution of women for wearing the veil. Words that are not just a cry against the economic crisis, but also a direct challenge to the regime's ideological focus. The energy crisis also worsens the situation, affecting critical sectors. The blackout of 22 cement factories paralyzed construction, while the lack of fertilizers and water pumps threatens food security, putting the next harvest cycle at risk. Structural problems that highlight how inadequate management and international pressure are leading Iran to the brink of collapse. Looking outward, Iran is isolated. Its network of regional allies is deeply shaken with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, for years a pillar of Iranian influence in Syria, representing an immeasurable strategic loss. In Lebanon, Hezbollah faces serious difficulties after the elimination of much of its leadership in Israeli operations, and Hamas, another important ally, has also suffered severe blows after Israeli retaliation attacks, leaving Iran dependent on less effective allies in Iraq and Yemen, who, despite being committed, struggle to pose a real threat. Therefore, Iran's nuclear program takes on a central role as the only major deterrent against external threats. The Iranian government knows that its nuclear program is the last tool to balance the power scale, mainly against Israel and the United States, but accelerating this program brings many consequences. Internally, this generates divisions between those who believe it's the only option to ensure the country's sovereignty and those who fear even graver retaliations. Internationally, the rhetoric of Western powers and preemptive strikes like those carried out by Israel in 2024 clearly show the risks of military escalation. The deterrent strategy also faces limits. Israeli airstrikes, aimed directly at nuclear infrastructures, have weakened Iran's air defenses. So, even if Tehran invests in its nuclear capability, the vulnerability of its military infrastructure remains a critical weak point. Lastly, the nuclear program is also a bargaining chip. By signaling advancements in this field, Iran tries to pressure Western powers into considering a more favorable negotiation, but at the same time, this brings the scenario of direct military confrontation closer. With the fall of Bashar al-Assad and the weakening of allies like Hamas and Hezbollah, Israel emerges as an even more powerful force in the Middle East, creating an opportunity for even closer cooperation between the United States and Israel in containing Iran. For Israel, the elimination of immediate threats from its neighbors has strengthened its strategic position, and now, with renewed U.S. support under the Trump administration, the possibility of joint operations against Iran is closer, which could include everything from preemptive airstrikes against Iranian nuclear infrastructure to an intensification of economic sanctions to pressure Iran. This could represent almost unbearable pressure, with the union between these two powers expanding the resources and intelligence needed to destabilize the Iranian government. Moreover, this collaboration could result in even greater isolation for Iran, which is already facing difficulties maintaining its regional alliances. And this alliance is not just military. It also has profound diplomatic implications. Stronger coordination between the United States and Israel could influence other Western allies to join tougher sanctions against Iran, further weakening its economy and limiting its options on the international stage. The greatest risk for Tehran is that this coordinated pressure leads to an internal collapse or a desperate reaction, like a drastic acceleration of the nuclear program, or even direct attacks on Western allies in the region. In both cases, the cost would be extremely high for the Iranian regime. For Iran, 2025 promises to be a critical year with internal crises and external tensions, creating an unpredictable environment that could shape the future of the region. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates.